Okay, we want to welcome back to the show Hal Kempfer. He's a former Marine intelligence officer and security expert. Hal, we've been talking with you over the last couple of weeks about the potential deployment of National Guard troops, and now we're talking about right here in our own backyard, potentially San Francisco. We heard the president calling the city a mess and that federal intervention is needed. How likely is it, in your opinion, that the city could, in fact, see National Guard troops?
Well, Heather, the president could he could federalize National Guard troops and send them in to protect federal property, potentially protect federal personnel, for example, ICE agents or something like that as they're doing their duties. But what Mark Benioff was talking about was, can the National Guard troops become cops? That can't happen unless the president invokes the Insurrection Act, which certainly he's been talking about the Insurrection Act very publicly. He has not done that yet, and Posse Comitatus, the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibits federal military from doing law enforcement. So that particular scenario, I think Mark Benioff may have thought something based on what maybe he saw in Washington, D.C., but that would not work in San Francisco.
All right, so Hal, I mean, you heard the message today from Mayor Lurie, other city leaders, law enforcement leaders in the city, touting the declining crime rates in San Francisco and what they say are improvements to public safety across the board. How do you think that message will land with President Trump and the administration as they consider sending National Guard troops to San Francisco? Does it make a difference?
Well, I don't know if it makes a big difference. I mean, they're stating facts. They're just stating what the statistics are. But then again, I look where President Trump has deployed other troops, and I don't think that, city leaders saying, well, we've had a decline in certain categories of crime really seems to deter President Trump from what he's doing. And what he looks at is the larger scale, which is what is the total crime rate, not just the short-term decreases or longer-term decreases, but what is the crime rate? And I think that's what he's looking at there. And he may be looking at specifically at certain areas like the federal building in San Francisco, the courthouse, some other areas where he might want to just do a presence thing to put troops right there. He doesn't have to do the Insurrection Act in order to do that. He can just order it, make it happen.
Okay, so Hal, let's talk a little bit about how it's going in other cities. Are these crime-fighting missions, paying off? Are they, in fact, effective?
It's tough to tell. Obviously, there's so much tied up in the courts right now. With Chicago, you can't really determine one thing or another. Memphis is kind of a work in progress, shall we say. Washington, D.C., there have been results, and they have had some significant drops in crime. I kind of wonder, is that the presence of the troops there actually doing something, or is it just the presence of the troops there being a deterrent to crime? Either way, they've had significant drops in crime.
Yeah, let's talk about, sort of broadly speaking, what the role of the National Guard might look like in San Francisco, because, when we're looking at what we can learn from these other situations. In some of these other cities that we've talked about, the administration is really sending in the National Guard, in many cases, to protect federal immigration agents or these ICE facilities like we see in Chicago here. But here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, we really haven't seen widespread ICE operations. So it sort of begs the question, where are the troops likely to go? You talk about federal buildings. Is that your best guess?
Federal property, federal buildings, federal facilities. There are a number of facilities around. Technically, U.S. post offices are federal property. So there's a lot of places where they could put those troops. But, you do get into the question of, is that really a smart idea? Is that an effective use of resources to protect those things? Right. Does the threat merit it? Now, with that said, in terms of protecting ICE and ICE operations, with this cartel threat against putting bounties on their head, so to speak, this may change the overall threat environment. So there might be a much larger reassessment of the protection of ICE officers, CBP, and others.
And while today we certainly heard from San Francisco leaders with an urgent message, which is, we can handle this, we've got this, stay out to federal National Guard troops. Do you see, though, a scenario in which some Bay Area cities might actually welcome this help and they would be deployed in other Bay Area cities, but not specifically San Francisco?
Heather, I think that's very possible. Some cities, it's the Bay Area, but it's not all San Francisco. I know sometimes San Francisco thinks it is, but it's not. And other cities have different priorities. They have different political makeup. and they have different compositions. So if I go out to Dublin, I have a large military facility right there in Dublin. If I go to the East Bay, you know, I've got Alameda with the U.S. Coast Guard there. So there's a lot of possibilities that you might see maybe skirting around, if you will, San Francisco and putting federal troops in other locations.
All right. We appreciate the perspective. Always good to have you on. Former Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Alex. Heather.
Take care. All right.